Okay. So I think I was just talking about kind of this paradigm shift that we have used in our research to use parents really specifically for screening. Okay, next slide. Next slide. And I have to brag a little bit. This is my 2-week-old granddaughter, new granddaughter right there, a picture of her. And my daughter's like majored in fashion design and is in the fashion industry. So ever the fashionista, right? The little newborn has to have a fancy outfit too. So I'm going to talk about developmental and behavioral screening, first of all, and about specifically about the tools that I've helped develop, and that's the Ages and Stages Questionnaire, that's ASQ, and then the Ages and Stages Questionnaire, Social Emotional, ASQ-SE. Talking a little bit about if you develop a tool, then what you need to do is figure out how people can use it. And it's very different from maybe adult testing where you have different professionals who are buying a test and using it. But what we wanted to do with these assessments that parents could do was to really get them into a variety of settings. So medical settings, early childhood settings, school settings. So we really have to think about a systems implementation. Talk a little bit about parents as screeners and then culture and adaptation and how important that is. Okay, so screening, yes, is, next slide. Really ask just 2 questions. Does this child need further assessment? Yes or no? And are family supports needed? So these are the kind of the 2 questions that we ask when we're doing screening of preschool children. So I'm really limiting my comments to preschool children. So for screening, we just get a yes or a no. Child seems to be okay. No, the child needs a further assessment. And that's really what we're using these tools, the ASQ and the ASQ-SE for. Okay, next slide. And thinking about the pyramid model, Luis, do they know about the pyramid model at all? Yes?
I don't know, maybe not.
Okay. So thinking about systems and what we're using in this originally came, I think, from public health, but really using a promotion model, a public health model where we're trying to, first of all, look at all children and figure out kind of their developmental needs. Are they doing okay? Or are they not? And then sifting them out gradually. A next level would be those children that might need more help. And then the very top of the pyramid would be those who really need individual therapy or educational intervention. So the Ages and Stages questionnaires are really for this primary, very basic promotion or figuring out how the population of young kids is functioning. Next. So for primary prevention or universal screening, it's conducted in, at least this is in the US, and it would be really interesting when I'm done if people want to talk about specifics about where they live and how they see that system. But our pediatricians conduct developmental screening as part of well child visits. Our preschools do. We have these compensatory preschool settings that are called Head Start. I think you have their state-funded preschools, and I know that the Ages and Stages is used in several of the preschools to use kind of this primary prevention method. As I said, does a child need further assessment? Are family supports needed? And teachers also do these on children. It's ideal to get parent input or to have a parent as a primary respondent. Okay, next. So the 2 tools I mentioned these, the Ages and Stages Questionnaire is a developmental questionnaire. It has 30 questions in these domains of communication, gross motor, fine motor, problem solving, and personal social. And so there's 6 questions in each of those areas that, and if any of the areas are below the empirically based cutoff points, then those children need to be seen for further evaluation, that there may be some developmental problems, and so then they would go to that next level of intervention. The second tool, the social emotional tool, is we're just looking at really general development. And it does not have domains, but it's overall, is this child have social emotional competence, or do they need some extra assistance? Okay. So this is an example of a 24-month ages and stages questionnaire. Again, I said as developers of an assessment, we tried to get questions that parents would see every day, they'd be able to understand. And I'm kind of looking at this example, and we're working on a new version of this. And the fourth item there is, does your child flip switches off and on? And we've had to revise that to have something to do with like computers and things, because hardly anybody has switches anymore in their houses or toys. And so we've had to kind of embrace the electronic age and in some of our and changing some of these items. But you know, a book, can she turn a page by herself? Can they stack several blocks or toys? And this is for 24 months or 2 years of age. And a parent answers yes, they can. Sometimes it's for an emerging skill. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't. And then not yet means they do not have that skill. So this is communication for a 4-year-old. Does your child use all of the words in a sentence? And these are ones that have been much more tricky, if you will, to translate. Luis was involved in translating these into Portuguese. And so we've really had to rely on translators and on really looking at the intent of items when we're doing translations. Okay. And then this is a social emotional questionnaire. So this is a 30-month-old, 2.5-year-old. Does your child destroy or damage things on purpose? Do they hurt themselves on purpose? Do they play alongside other children? And for this one, parents answer most of the time, sometimes, or rarely, or never. The 4-year-old questionnaire, does your child seem happy? Do they use words to tell you what you want, and do they follow rules? And for this questionnaire, it's kind of reverse scored in that the problem behaviors receive the points. And so a child with a high score on the ASQSE is one that would indicate referral. And on the ASQ, the developmental one, the points are for competence. And so the children with the low scores would be the one that would be referred for a further look. So Diane Bricker, I mentioned my colleague, started this development of these tools in 1980. And really based on a very old publication by Hilda Knobloch, who had written the Gazelle Developmental Inventory. I don't know if you've seen that in Brazil or not, but and what she found is that if she took some items from the Gazelle and gave it to parents, then she would look at how accurate they were compared to a professional assessor. Okay. And her conclusions were, yeah, it does work. We need to do more research, but it seems like parents can do a pre-screening, or they can be used as assessors and have some role. And she was a developmental pediatrician, so she was looking at medical settings specifically. So this was the first questionnaire that we developed at the University of Oregon. So this research that Hilda Knobloch had done was not advanced at all. She didn't do any more research on it. So Diane Bricker thought, well, let's start with birth to 3, have parents complete these for kids from the hospital. So really recruiting from kids that had gone to the typical kids, as well as some kids from the neonatal intensive care unit. Okay. And that this is NICU, means the neonatal intensive care unit. And many in the medical world said it won't work, that we can't use parents, we can only use physicians, right? And I think, with this research that was started in the mid 80s, that by the 1990s, people were realizing that, yeah, we can use parents as assessors. And we had at that time like a birth to 4-year-old questionnaire that, I mean, there were different intervals, but spanned those ages, that when we looked at a questionnaire a parent did and then the full scale assessment by a trained professional, that we had about 85% agreement, which is all that any screening tool really has anyway. So that 85% of the time, if a parent said the child was doing fine, the professional assessor on a longer assessment said the same thing, and vice versa. 15% if the child wasn't doing okay, then that professional agreed with, or there might not be an agreement on 15%. So once we had these tools developed and large databases, in those days, all of our research was with pencil and paper, and either we'd actually go to visit places all around the country and get preschools to complete questionnaires, or we'd get some medical professionals or some of our protective services. And and we started realizing that that at this point, professional assessments were getting more and more expensive, and programs, especially early childhood programs, could not afford to use them. So we really started working on training a lot of people in how to use the questionnaires in a valid and reliable way. And then kind of the systems building then needed to follow. So working on state, regional, such as what we did in Brazil, we're looking at a really large system out of Rio and figuring out how the questionnaires could best be used. Were they successful? And if not, what changes needed to be made so that they could be valid, reliable, and really highly useful to different disciplines and populations. And it makes sense that if you use parents or maybe even teachers in some instances instead of professionals, that it's going to be much more cost effective. So that, we were screening for $25 per questionnaire, whereas a professional was going to be several hundred to do the same assessment. And then the medical field, I think, was kind of slower to really to embrace parents as assessors. And I think there's still some in the medical field that aren't sure. But I think that now that the American Academy of Pediatrics and many, I'm not sure about the Portuguese, but many pediatric societies recommend that pediatricians do developmental screening using parents at least like 6, 18, 24 months. And so they might not necessarily use the ages and stages questionnaire, but that they really need for good practice to get parent input and to do low-cost screening for those parents who can't read and complete questionnaires. It's not going to be all of them, but they now really are using the ASQ and other tools as part of their medical records, and it's really integrated into their systems. Okay. These are just some examples. Korea, where both the ASQ and the ASQ SE is being used. In South Korea, one of the interesting applications for these tools are in the orphanages that they have still in South Korea, and trying to figure out kind of how to help children and get them into services when they're in situations in which they are not living with their parents. China, there's really large scale work, that's fine. And Taiwan, these are just some other examples of where it's being used. Okay. This was another example of an early study in 19 countries, and that it compared the ASQ with a physician, a very quick physician neurosensory examination, and they found it was really effective in all these different countries, which was surprising to us that it had such universal appeal. And I don't know if Luis has talked about this. I kind of can really defer to him maybe after I'm done about the research that's been done in Brazil. And there's been a lot done also in Chile also. Australia is really interesting. Anita DePrano has done a really nice job with really doing cultural adaptations, and looking at how with Maori children there that really don't have any materials that you would have in early childhood settings, how we can adapt those items. And so, for instance, she's changed one of the items that's like macaroni or spaghetti. Can you string it on a fishing line or a string? So she has, can your child string shells or seeds onto string or a fishing line? So she's really adapted it to fit in different, very unique cultural settings. And also added great pictures. So these are the pictures she's added to the items where she's so she has Maori families in each of the items depicted.
You want me to read that?
I do.
I will try. Gotcha. Kalayaman Samama. Did you
Very
get
good.
that?
Very
Yeah.
good. Better than me.
Yeah, maybe the answer is gonna be sometimes.
Right.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. So looking at, this is our research in the US, we now have a third edition for overall between the 2-month and the 60-month questionnaires. The sensitivity is how many children with who are developing typically are found by the ASQ compared to a professional assessment. And then specificity is how many children with problems are accurately identified. And those are both around 85%. The percent agreement, so if we look at the assessments by parents and the assessments by professionals, they agree again about 85% of the time. And under-identified means kids that kind of we've missed, that have problems that the ASQ does not pick up, 6%, and over-identified is 8%. And I think we kind of like the figures like this because we'd rather have kids have a second look that may not need it than to have some just kind of, as we say, fall through the cracks early on. And this is the social emotional questionnaire, the overall psychometrics, reliability test retest, internal consistency. So test retest is 89%. This was within 2 to 3 weeks by parents. Internal consistency is 0.84. Validity, we've looked at the same thing of having a professional assessment and how it agrees with the parent completed assessment. Sensitivity is about 0.81 and specificity is about 0.83. And a new tool that we've developed that Luis and some of his colleagues have been helping with us is a tool to look at the environment. So we know that if we look at child development in an ecological framework, that we have the child and the parent, and the environment is so important in terms of how the child comes out in the end what their developmental repertoire is. So this tool looks just at the environment and how that affects how that would affect child development. So the factors that really affect parenting and the home environment. So this tool is one in kind of a new area. It's called the social determinants of health, so that we know that that people who early on have a lot of kind of toxic stress and do not have these really healthy environments, that they later on they have heart problems, they have diabetes, they have more drug and alcohol problems, so that these early years of having a stable environment is really kind of a protection against some of these health problems as well as developmental problems. And so we're really looking at that model to look at the child within the family environment. This is just the English version of the environmental screening questionnaire, where we just ask questions in 6 areas. So they're education and employment, housing, child and family health, economics, family life, community. And we've kind of just finished up and are writing up the data, and it scored, that's fine. It scored similarly to the ages and stages questionnaire, social emotional. And the important thing here is, if you can, I know this writing is really hard to read, but there's the scores, the areas in the scores, and then according to the scores, and these are based on parent concerns and priorities, what action is taken. So if does a parent need some parenting classes? Does a child need physical therapy to help them be able to eat and function at home? Does a parent need transportation? I mean, who couldn't help with transportation? So, job security. So it's really looking at this wide environmental lens. And this tool, it's available free as a download. It's just in English and Spanish so far. So that was just where you can get it from Brooks Publishing. And you have to make you have to give them your name and stuff, but you don't get any advertisements or anything. You just have to have an account. And we've been looking at we have a sample of 30,000 children, because it's mostly online, not all, but mostly. Adequate reliability. Luis actually did the confirmatory factor analysis, which was excellent. And we looked at this and looked at the agreement with the ages and stages questionnaires. And it really only got significant as the children get older, so that children with higher ASQ scores also had higher or more problematic environmental screening scores. Yeah, so that you can go to the next one. That's kind of the same. So the advantages of parent-completed assessments is that they can really give rich information about children across settings, that it really reduces time in terms of kind of office logistics and things, 3 to 10 times percent. And it really is a teaching tool for parents. It structures kind of how they look at their children, and it also helps them when they go to a professional to look at, to be able to say, I'm really worried about this. My child can't do this when I do this tool. So it really helps them really communicate with a professional and also understand their child's development in a different way, hopefully. And engaging families, those of you who deal with young children know that we really want to do that. We want them to be involved as partners, and that this is really one way to really get that partnership started early on, is to use the parent-completed questionnaires. And one of the things that people will say as well, it only works with kind of middle income parents or better educated parents. And when we looked at this early on, we didn't really find that difference. That we found that there was not a significant difference between low income parents and middle income parents, given that they could read and understand the questionnaire. And so, parents have to have a reading level or they have to have someone helping them fill it out if they don't read. But given that, they tend to be as accurate. And again, if they had drug, alcohol problems, those things, those would really, those would limit kind of obviously how accurate they were. Is there any, okay. And I'm going to, this is like some other research that's showing about agreement with a parent report, which is finding kind of the same things, and also about agreement between the ASQ and the ASQ-SE, and that we really can see that if parent shows concerns on the developmental questionnaire, then they tend to also have problems on the social emotional questionnaire, which has been published, and I need to change that. So kind of in summary, parent report is really low cost. Parents often know the child best. And assessing parents, anyone in a natural environment, is much more comfortable and maybe more accurate. And that we as professionals, as test writers, if we can make questionnaires that ask for parents' current observable behavior without inference, without looking at the past, that we can really have pretty accurate outcomes on questionnaires. And I think I already said this, that kind of starting these partnerships early on is really an ideal thing to do if you're in the early childhood arena. So we can, so again, we can really use tools to bridge communication, to enhance parent knowledge, and really kind of validate that a parent has something important to share with professionals. Okay, we can skip this one too. And I think I mentioned this earlier, that it's really important in any assessment, and you as psychometricians know this, that we really have to, that tests aren't going to be used or be accurate unless they're culturally applicable and have been really adapted to individual users' needs and settings. So one of the nice things about these parent questionnaires is that you can really use alternate administrations. People have used like home health care providers, nurse assistants in offices, people that do home visits on families. Pediatricians can really help complete the questionnaires, and that anybody who kind of looks at these tools, and we need to have norms for different countries, different large settings, that we really need to get that normative sample that includes all the diverse populations within that area or that sample. And the way that we can score the ASQ, we can really omit items. And I know that some of the tests that you use, you can't do that, but the parents don't have to complete all the tools. And then we also have gotten better at realizing that families can use chopsticks instead of spoons. A lot of families don't like the mirror items, so we can kind of skip those. And, again, I mentioned translations, that those have to be done with care and with people that are really aware of the intent of the items in a different language. Okay, we can skip that one. There's agesandstages.com has it's really a nice website if you wanted more information about this. This is a Brooks site. And we're looking now at the ASQ4, which Luis has been doing our analysis of, which is incredibly helpful. We're simplifying the language. We're trying to make it more culturally broad, and we're collecting data with online data and also paper data. And these are beautiful Oregon mountains, and I know you have beautiful beaches and mountains there also. So in my emails there, if people had other questions or would want to email me. So thank you. You're still, you're,
O microfone está fechado, Luiz.
yeah, you're muted, Luis.
I'm really sorry about that.
There you go.
I was trying to find if someone has any questions here for Dr. Jane. Anyone? Okay, I think Renato. Renato, you there? Because we were talking before, and Renato was asking me, because you were here in Brazil, I think like 10 years ago, and Renato was asking me how was the experience of being here in Brazil like 10 years ago, trying to develop like a policy, to assess everyone here. So what was the experience?
For us, or for working
Maybe-
with people?
Yeah.
You should ask your professor, right? I think Brazil was really interesting because we had a lot of people who did not like assessments, and the people in the early childhood area did not want any assessments to be used on kids because they felt like it was, that you were really kind of tagging them or, using artificial situations, and that they were all going to be that they were not good cultural tools, and that you should use no assessments on kids. And so it was actually really difficult in terms of trying to let people know that this was really a different paradigm, and looking at kids in natural environments and using parents, that hopefully some of the problems with traditional, and especially the older assessments used on children, that those really didn't pertain to this assessment. But it was very challenging because there were people who did not want any assessments, period, on young children.
Yeah, but I have a question for you, because here in Brazil, we don't have the multi-tier system of support. In the United States, you do have that there. So do you think having a multi-tier system of support makes it easier to have psychological tests, or do you think that's no relationship at all?
Oh, definitely. I think it is. Right? Because if you can figure out some really cost-effective universal assessments or universal ways to look at populations, then you can use you professionals who know assessments in the second and third tier, and it is really much more economical because you're not giving kids tests who don't need them, or you're looking at a system where everyone's kind of working together, and kids aren't given multiple tests they don't need, or families. So I do think it's that systems approach is much more effective and economical.
And I don't know if you know this answer. However, I was thinking who came first, like the chicken or the egg, because here in Brazil, we don't have the system. And we do not have as well the multi-tier system of support. So we don't have both options here. But I don't know who comes the first. If we try to develop like better development tools, or if we need to develop like a multi-tier system of support that will increase the use of tests. I don't know who's first.
Well, it seems like to develop the system, you need the assessments,
I
right?
agree.
You need to start with those at least, and then to let those lead you to, I think, developing even if the tools are not perfect to kind of use those as drafts at least while you're developing a system.
In Brazil, 20, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13, the politician at the time changed ASQ3 and ASQ-SC for like diaries, like, yes, like qualitative approach. So teachers were supposed to write notes about their students, and they were trying to use that notes to, I don't know, something. However, that's very hard because it's unreliable, the validity is super low, and two different people can read the same text and find different answers with that. However,
Exactly.
since that time, like 2013, today, I think the system is exactly the same. So teachers are needed to write things about their students, and someone will try to, like hocus pocus, like a magician, trying to figure out what is going on with children. What is insane? It's insane.
Yeah, it is. It's a different I mean, to do qualitative notes is really, you're really documenting development and you're not assessing it. Right. So it has a totally different purpose than if you did an assessment.
That's
So.
correct. I was never thinking about that, but that's correct. Like a doctor who has like a report and one thing different. So if you can imagine just a doctor with just a report and not like a test. That's
Right.
great. But maybe in the future, maybe in the future, because after the pandemics, here in Brazil, people are very concerned with child development thing. So maybe in the future, I don't know if the environment will be good to have like more ASQ and SQ4 here. Maybe in the future, I don't know. So we have a new question for you. So Renata,
Okay.
great lecture. Thank you a lot. I was also wondering, has there been this sort of resistance of this nature and to this degree anywhere else, particularly in the US?
I would say no in a word, but there's still I think there's an early childhood developmental people who are just against assessment. And I think in the US, there was this very back and forth between kind of people who wanted to use assessment and this this early childhood, very kind of developmental based, but who did not want any assessment at all. And I feel like over the years that there's been some sort of approachment, if you will, where people in the early childhood area are realizing that you can do some assessments, especially using parents, which is much more kind of organic and less intimidating and less labeling than using professional assessments. That you can use. Nice. He's the one that did. He's the one that did the assessment. That did the
Like
system many years
so
ago.
I just, hey, what's going on?
Yes, Dr. Landiera, that was great. So I think Brazil, for me, that was the place where the people were most upset about it, most opposed to it, and had the very strongest feelings. And you people might have more answers than I did at the time about why that is and how to change it.
And let's hope for the future, right? There's a
Yes,
music, I don't remember the lyrics, but waiting for the best, but hoping for the best. I don't remember. Forever young,
forever young. Yes.
that's expecting the worst. So Jane, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's always a pleasure to listen to your speech. It's always a pleasure to, to share this space with you. I'm really grateful for everything that you did for me and for every one of my students while in the United States. And I'm looking forward to being there again. Maybe.
I'm looking forward to having you back here, and thank you very much I know you had to change a few things around for my schedule, and I appreciate that too. So thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And have a good one.
Yeah, you have a good day too. Ciao.
Okay.